and exactly what we are experiencing today dealing with Similac. If you look in the news in the last 4 weeks, you will understand what Similac is experiencing and why after you watch this video, correct? Now, around January 12th, I linked a report that Infamil Similac released and another insurance company released. It says premature babies fed formula in hospitals premature babies fed formula in the hospital is eligible for major cash settlements because the families is dealing with infants that is dealing with necrotizing enterocolitis or NEC. This is a complication of the intestines, reversing the healthy cycle of the intestines in infants. And this is Infamil Similac. And you can look this up in the news. You can Google it, correct? This is what they are dealing with, and it's no coincidence that they are dealing with this. 9 times out of 10, companies like Nestle is the main suspect and responsible for these complications that is taking place. And yes, Nestle, the water company. Yes, Nestle, the chocolate company, correct? Why do you say that, Khan? Well, I will tell you why I say that. If you look up the origins of these companies, which I always say the manufacturing companies and the production companies is the enemies. If you look up these companies, you will find the origin of these dark matters that we are dealing with today. If you look up Nestle, you get Henry Nestle, who was a German scientist around the 1800s, mid-1800s, late 1800s. He was a German scientist who always looked for the golden niche. He always tried to find a catastrophe, tried to find a medical issue and get wealthy from it, get compensated from it, correct? Around the mid-1800s, there was a large level of infant mortality. Now, this was from women not being able to breastfeed for other complications, but they were dealing with infant mortality. So what he did is link up with a Swiss chocolate maker, which we will talk about in a minute. He linked up with a Swiss chocolate maker around 1867. And this Swiss chocolate maker hipped him to a substance called flour milk. This flour milk was the main ingredient behind his next product that he put out, which was farine lactate. This was the first substance to stand as a baby formula other than breast milk. Now, he sold the company in 1875, and this is when it gets a little weird, because the Nestle family company, who created the lactate in the first baby formula and got paid off the first universal problem, because this is not only in America, but this was a universal global problem of the infant mortality in 1867, mainly based off diets. It was a global problem, so he got paid from everywhere in the world, correct? And once he did that, he sold the company around 1875. When he sold the company, the Nestle family company became Nestle Group. Once it became the Nestle Group, they developed a system much like the founders. They figured out how to get paid off of every natural disaster, off of every physical complication that arises globally. They figured out how to get paid. They were the first ones who made their saleswomen dress up as nurses. They went to clinics, they went to schools, they went to libraries, they hung out in front of low-income neighborhood grocery stores, and they pushed the narrative that baby formula was a necessity and more beneficial to young infants and babies and newborns than breast milk. By doing this, they persuaded the minds of young, new, fragile-minded mothers of all races who did not know what to do. They persuaded them to take this more simpler formula. You didn't have to deal with breastfeeding. You didn't have to deal with latching. But it was a pesticidal, a cancerous chemical indeed. Now, later on, in the later 1800s, around 1870s and the 1880s, I could be wrong with those days, a movie came out and an article came out. These authors produced some content called The Baby Killer. This was the fight against combating against things like breast milk. correct? They were fighting for the cause of mothers doing the right thing. And they tried to expose things like baby formula being bad for babies, and they tried to come to Nestle, but Nestle hushed them up, correct? Now, once infant mortality kicked in, even with Similac, Similac got intelligent and figured out how to create their own rules and laws to these complications. Because people like the baby, once authors put out the content like the baby killer, this spiked a boom where people boycotted baby formulas. So what they did was the International Council of Infant Food Industries, that's ICOFI, correct? This organization was the ones who created the laws and the regulations against people coming for these major corporations, correct? So around 1977, almost 100 years later, of people taking this substance, this cancerous substance that had no FDA regulations, no labeling laws. This cancerous substance made it 100 years to 1977, and this was when Infant Formula Action Coalition was started, or the Infect Coalition, correct? They boycotted it once again. This got the attention of the World Health Organization, or the WHO. Once WHO got involved, it took till 1981. Remember, this is 1977 when the Infant Formula Action Coalition came into play and started the first boycott. A couple years later, the World Health Organization in 1981 banned false advertising for Nestle. They could no longer put the false advertising behind Similac or behind baby formula. And this is when we get to Similac. Because what did they do? They had problems selling they had problems selling the Farine lactate. They had problems selling the formulas with the bad labeling. So what did they do? Just like companies we see today, they changed the name. They found a man named Luciano in Colombia, correct? He was the one responsible for Similac that we see today, the infant complications that we're dealing with today in 2022. In 2005, correct? In 2005, Luciano was kidnapped and he was murdered. When they looked into his murder in his case, they seen that he sent letters to Nestle company that he was in fear for his life and he was receiving threats, not only for creating Similac, but behind the dark secrets of Nestle company and Similac origins. Correct? And all of this is facts. You can look this up, folks. And you can look up the more deep secrets about Nestle and the water companies and them trying to own water and population control and who the Nestle family or the Nestle food group at this point, who are the top heads, correct? So this is the importance of knowing the manufacturing companies and the production companies, correct? Nestle is probably responsible for what we are seeing Similac go through today, what these babies are going through. This is a financial scheme here. They have started it from the start since the 1800s, getting money off of women being too lazy or just having other medical complications to the point where they can't breastfeed, and they're figuring out how to get paid from it. This is the importance of breastfeeding women. So all men, urge your baby's mama, urge your wife, urge your mother to breastfeed more. Fight for the women's liberation of breast milk. And it sounds funny until you look up the dark secrets and wars of what's been going on against our women and against our infants and newborns for over 200 years now. Power's Ultimate families, everybody stay healthy out there.